Hello YouTube, this is Kenneth1619 coming back with some more World of Tanks gameplays here. Starting off with a new series, World of Tanks historical gameplays. I'm using the T34-85 here. And basically I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how this is going to work. It's just basically going to do a little background of the tank and show you some awesome gameplays of this tank. And that's basically it, guys. So T34-85. Well, this tank was essentially categorized as an upgunned version of the successful base T-34 medium tank, which was designed and built in large numbers by the Soviet Union in World War II, and the Germans had invaded the Soviet Union in July of 1941, and the Panzer III and the Panzer IV series, which had formed the backbone of the armored assaults up to now in the war. However, things quickly changed when the Soviets unleashed their heavily armed and armed T-34 medium tanks alongside their KV-1s and KV-2 series heavy tanks. Now, the T-34 is obviously a medium tank. The T-34-85 is basically a gunned-up version of the T-34 just to combat the German Tigers and Panzer IVs. Basically, the T-34 had a 76mm main gun, which is pretty much effective against Panzer IIIs and IVs up until this point in the war. But when the Germans started, putting out those Panzers and those Tiger tanks out in the battlefield, basically they had bigger guns and more armor. So the T-34-85 basically came in and was a beefed up version of the T-34. It had 75mm gun and an 88mm gun. Now, the T-34-85 actually went back and featured an entirely new 5-speed transmission and a new 3-man turret design, which housed an additional crew member, electrical turret traverse to speed up gunnery response, and a useful cupola for the tank commander, which is pretty cool. And basically, the cost of this was a little bit of speed, which benefited it already an excellent base design. And initially, the T-34-85 called for a heavy penetrating main gun platform with sufficient mobility and good armor protection. Now, as you can see, the T-34-85 has basically great accuracy when it comes to shooting at long distance. It's particularly one of my favorite tanks to use when I'm going to sit back and camp and do some sniping, which is basically what I do in this video, just because you'll see in a moment, I start getting wrecked left and right. Like literally like 6 shells hit me all at once in a couple seconds here. But that's a little, basically how accurate the gun is of the T-34-85. Now, the T-34-85 basically came out in late 1943 and early 1944, and they went through a short initial production batch run, which basically means they weren't produced in large numbers to begin with. Early forms, which were put out in the field, with the D5T 85mm gun system, which is known as the model 1943. And then basically a follow version, or a newer version, later came in production, which was known as the model 1944, and became the definite T-34-85, which mounted a ZIS S53 series 85mm main gun, which is simpler to mass produce for the Soviet war effort, and basically the radio suite was also relocated from the bow to the turrets in these models, and a new gunner sight was installed, basically making the gun more effective and a better killing machine overall, which is pretty darn cool. Now, some 12,000 T-34-85s were delivered by the end of the war in Europe. In May of 1945, and captured samples were pressed into service by the desperate German army. So basically, the German army at this point was running out of tanks. Their factories have been bombed by the English, so they won't be able to produce maybe tanks, so they were capturing Soviet tanks and using them as their own. And after World War II, the T-34-85 existed in greater numbers yet and delivered to some Soviet-friendly nations like North Korea and China. And this is where the new Chinese tanks come into play. If you guys haven't tried a new Chinese tank, they basically have a version of the T-34-85 and looks basically exactly the same. It probably has a faster engine or something, and it's I believe the lower tier. But basically, they were considered upcoming nuclear war between 1950 and 1953, and North Korea itself fielded about 150 of the T-34-85s at the beginning of the Korean War, and several T-34-85s are still being believed to be operational in the frontline servers even today. And a testament of both successful design of the T-34 as a whole and the lack of forward thinking on the past of the North Koreans. Basically, the North Koreans love this tank so much they still use it today. My opinion on that would be I would actually upgrade because our you guys know modern tanks are pretty darn crazy now. The T-34-85 won't do anything against an Abrams tank or a Leopard 2 German tank. But all in all, over 55,000 T-34-85s were built by the end of the production, and in bulk of that, roughly 40,000 were produced during the during the war years alone. Nevertheless, the tank system proved to be most successful tank Soviet design up to that date. So basically, the Soviets are very proud of their T-34 design. And if you guys haven't heard of the Battle of the Bulge, basically the Germans were outnumbered by T-34s, and they were just ramming their tanks into Tiger tanks, Panther tanks, just because they had so much tanks, so much tanks. In that battle, I believe in excess of 2,000. Don't quote me on that. I just remember that from history class. I might be off by a couple hundred. But basically, the T-34-85 during the Cold War, which took place between 1960 and 1969, retained many of their general base appearance and only discernible to the experts of the T-34 lineage. So they basically didn't change much in physical design. The Czechoslovakia mass-produced the T-34-85 and distributed them widely across the Soviet sphere. So all in all, this tank is pretty darn cool, and it was pretty effective because North Korea, China, and Czechoslovakia basically used these tanks for themselves, producing their own versions, which are just slightly different. And pretty cool history of how it all came to be. It's basically a T-34 beefed up. We got an 85mm gun instead of a 60 or 76mm gun. It has a new 5-speed transmission, so you can go a bit faster, adding an additional crew member, new machine gun layout, the radio layout. And that comes to the conclusion from researching the history of these tanks. It's pretty darn accurate as far as the tank in the game. It plays out exactly how you'll find descriptions of these tanks, forums or anywhere you look online. This tank is pretty darn awesome. It's my second favorite tank behind the 1390, and as you can see, I'm just making shots from 450 yards here. I believe meters actually. And I'm basically hitting the top of that Panzer tank. This tank is pretty darn accurate. I just love its mobility, and it can take a couple of hits actually. The only tank is actually better than it, and its tier is going to be probably the E8, the Sherman E8, just because of its high reloading speed. If it wasn't for that, they'd be evenly matched. The E8 actually has more armor, but I know exactly where to hit the E8, so you won't be able to fool me. And I can't believe I missed that shot. That was pretty ridiculous. I think my gunner was drunk there. too much chocolate or something. But yeah, this is pretty cool gameplay. I didn't get much kills, but I hit, I believe, the most players in the game here, or on this match. I'm sorry. And if you guys ever get a chance, you should research through this tech tree and get a chance to use the T34-85. It's an excellent tank to use. I'm definitely going to be using it for quite some time. So yeah, I don't think I'll stop using it for a while. Let's just well, I can talk about some specs here of the tank. It weighs 26.5 tons, and its length is 6.68 meters, or 21 feet and 11 inches, and its width is 3 meters, or 9 feet and 10 inches. Height 2.45 meters, so basically 2.5, or 8 feet in total. So it's basically a cool size tank, crew of 4. And thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you in another video for 1390.